Take a deep breath, take the higher road. That's what they always say, as if they know the way. They won't take it from me. But don't ever doubt yourself, 'cause life ain't just a dream. You made your own, so kick and scream. The people will act with a never-ending force. You never had the chance, so what you waiting for? The day has come, my friend, 'cause this is war. It's time and this is war.
There is a battle being waged in hospitals across America that most people cannot imagine until it happens to them. The battle for the very right to parent your own child. Families are walking into hospitals seeking help, and instead of compassion, they are met with intimidation, coercion, and the looming threat of medical kidnapping. Child Protective Services, meant to protect the vulnerable, is too often weaponized as a tool of compliance. It is a chilling reality, and one that nearly cost 4-year-old Autumn Schall her life. Autumn was taken to Lucile Packard Children's Hospital in Palo Alto, California, after an E. coli diagnosis. What should have been a straightforward case of fluid management turned into a nightmare. She was labeled a case study, subjected to a barrage of aggressive interventions, denied parental consent for blood products, kept intubated long after she met criteria for extubation, and her family was threatened with a court order to force treatment against their wishes. And when her mother, Hope, refused to be silent, CPS was called in, a move we recognize all too well as a tactic to gaslight and strip parents of their rights. In that moment, Autumn's family was being held hostage by a system that claimed to care for her, but was in fact inflicting harm. This is where Remnant Healthcare stepped in. We rallied advocacy, media attention, and community support. And by God's grace, Autumn was rescued from the system's grip and returned home to the arms of her loving family. Today, 2 years later, Autumn is thriving. And I am honored to be joined by her mother, Hope, who stood boldly in the fire to protect her child. You're listening to Nurses Out Loud on America Out Loud Talk Radio. I'm your host, Nurse Kimberly Overton. Before we get started today, I do want to encourage our listeners, if you have questions or comments, or perhaps you want to share your own experiences with what you're seeing on the front lines of healthcare, you can now submit those to us directly by visiting our website at nursesoutloud.com. We would love to hear from you. We encourage all of you to engage in the battle and find your voice in this fight. But until you are able to do that, we will continue to be that voice for you. Hope Schachter is a former marriage and family therapist and functional nutritionist who left the professional world to stay home and start a family just prior to 2020, after becoming disillusioned with the efficacy and limitations of her scope of practice in traditional treatment models. Despite all of that, Hope found herself navigating the medical industrial complex while battling for her parental rights to save her preschooler from the devastating harms of standardized care, which had resulted in Autumn fighting for her life. Hope has been a longstanding advocate for medical freedom, birth autonomy, and the body's innate wisdom in healing with proper support and connection. She is here to share not only the painful truth of what her family endured, but also a powerful update on where Autumn is now and why their story must serve as a warning and a call to action for every parent in this country. Hope, welcome back. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I'm really glad to have you back. I think a lot of my listeners, I know a lot of my listeners are very familiar with your story, but for those who are not, if you could just take us back to the very start of what happened when Autumn was first diagnosed with E. coli and how you ended up at Lucile Packard Children's Hospital.
Yeah, it's kind of profound because I feel like it was yesterday. I walked through kind of her story almost every day. Even, just recently, like if we share just a little bit about what we've been through with someone new, I talk about the fact that my toddler started with E. coli. He was a toddler. Now he's a preschooler. He was about 18 months at the time and he was fine. He other than the diarrhea, you wouldn't know that he wasn't like feeling well or anything. But Autumn, she contracted the E. coli probably about a handful of days later, and it presented very differently than my son Valor. She had originally she had said that she was actually having trouble going to the bathroom, and just because our family had already been through a lot leading up to that, I know I've shared with you before that we were fire victims. Yeah. And just in terms of stress response, I felt like Autumn's little system could kind of convey that pretty easily. So I didn't know if it was just sort of stress with her constipation, or if she was coming down with something like Valor had. Because at that time we didn't know what Valor had was E. coli. We just knew he had diarrhea. And so she told me that her tummy hurt in a particular spot, and that she was having trouble going to the bathroom. So I said, okay, well, we'll kind of wait and see. And then she wound up throwing up, which was the only time that she actually threw up until we went to the hospital, until Lucile Packard. So she threw up once, and then she wound up having 5 days of diarrhea every 15 minutes. And that's like an important part of the story to me, because even though during those handful of days we went to urgent care more than once, eventually one of the doctors at urgent care mentioned that it could be intussusception. And when I looked up the symptoms for intussusception, it seemed to make the most sense to me, because of that every 15 minute is like the kind of main criteria for that issue, which is sort of like I think like a bowel prolapse.
It's like the intestines are telescoping into one another.
Yeah. And so the reason that we were told to go to the emergency room was because supposedly urgent care does not do pediatric CT scans, which they said she would need in order to diagnose it. And then in order to treat it, she would need some form of enema. And obviously I would not give my child an enema at home. We try to do as much at home as we can. And Autumn hadn't even had Tylenol up to that point in her little life. So we did eventually go to the hospital, to the emergency room, the local emergency room, especially because she also met the criteria for what's described with intussusception as like jelly stools. So there was like bloody stool, like she hadn't really been eating much, and so what she was able to pass became what they describe as a symptom of intussusception. So but she had been drinking fluids just fine. And I remember when urgent care had sent us home with a to collect a urine sample, being like, well, she's probably dehydrated from having so much diarrhea. And my husband said, oh, she's peeing just fine. And he showed me, he collected, the urine from her. But urgent care had not tested her stool, because they had told me there that she would have to be able to separate stool from urine. So when you're 4, that's really hard to do, to say, don't pee when you're having diarrhea. So that had too many challenges with it. So we had gone to the emergency room. What I have learned since, and I can't remember with, our kind of original interview or interviews, was that Autumn actually only met one of 3 criteria for HUS when we were in the local emergency room. But they had already started communication with Lucile Packard about administering medications for HUS. So originally they said they would just keep her overnight for fluids, and that we could just monitor her. And then she came back positive for E. coli. And that's the only criteria she met for HUS at the time. I believe that she was borderline in regards to some of the other criteria, because there's 3, but she didn't meet those yet. And she actually didn't meet those until they started administering these medications that Lucile Packard uses to treat HUS, but that all of a sudden it pushes her over the threshold to meet the criteria. So I don't think that that's a coincidence. I do feel that, sure, maybe it should have been monitored, but we were told that that was kind of the position that they offered us, was that going to Lucile Packard, she would be just continuing fluid management to monitor her kidneys. And I guess the rationale behind that is that with E. coli, there's supposedly a toxic byproduct that can impact kidney function. And so they try to flush the toxins by using very harsh diuretics. And we were not given informed consent about the risks of these diuretics, or
And
what we would go on to find, which is, are they even approved for pediatric
right.
use?
And let me just clarify for my listeners who may not know what HUS is. It's
Yeah.
a hemolytic uremic syndrome that does affect it does affect children. It can occur in adults as well. It's typically triggered by an infection, most commonly E. coli. So that could, but there's typically a triad, right?
Right. Right.
Um, three main things. So we've got the hemolytic anemia, where the red blood cells are being destroyed, thrombocytopenia, low platelets, and then acute kidney injury or renal failure, which is a sudden loss of kidney function. Which of the three did Autumn present with? Do you
So she
recall?
was borderline with anemia.
Okay.
So yeah, so we hadn't met the other like more harsh criteria where we're having like very large concerns until we start the diuretics. And so I feel like that pushed her system over the threshold to be able to to be able to kind of maintain like some form of homeostasis as she was battling E.
Okay.
coli.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. I just wanted to make that clear because
Yes,
probably
thanks for
sitting at
doing
home going, I
that.
don't know what HUS is. But
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah,
no,
and
that's
just
okay.
and understanding that it's tied to E. coli, and so
Yes.
that was like, because she had the E. coli. I think that's why they even kind of started to look down the road of that she's at a potential risk for HUS.
Right.
Right.
So, and then when you were at Lucile Packard, which is a teaching hospital, and I know that you're familiar with that hospital because you actually worked for Lucile Packard at one time, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, that's what's really profound is, and also why I went in somewhat prepared. Like, this was not a situation that I would actually want for a child. And people don't realize that the vast majority of children's hospitals are teaching hospitals. And I even had kind of an acquaintance that visited me in the hospital when we were there with Autumn, who said that she had had her child briefly at Lucile Packard instead of the local hospital for like a stomach bug, and she hadn't realized that's why all of those doctors are in the room. She was like, I didn't realize there were like 7 doctors in the room because they're learning, because they're they're practicing on your child, that they're not well seasoned themselves. So
And they get excited, right? They get excited when there's that certain adrenaline rush, right?
yeah.
When it's like, ooh, something new, and they did out loud in front of you label your daughter a case study.
Yes, yeah, and that was actually by the attending. So I remember upon arrival that I had said, which probably set off a lot of alarm bells. Someone came in and introduced themselves as a doctor, and I said, "Are you the attending?" And it completely shifted the energy of the room because she wasn't; she was a resident. And she said, "Oh, have you had issues with residents before?" And I said, "No, but I worked here myself when I was not yet licensed as a therapist. So I was learning. I was, sadly practicing on people. I was getting skills. And so when you're using like serious language, especially in front of my child, some of these residents were talking about how she could die, which the attending eventually did as well in front of Autumn. So really adding more adrenaline to Autumn's system. But I felt that, that's happening kind of the poor bedside manner too, because these are students. They're not seasoned professionals. They don't have expertise. That's the most important part to me, is that these are not actually the experts that I'm speaking to. Often they're doing rounds through different departments to kind of learn where they want to be, or where maybe their skill sets lie. And so, I had my guard up that, treating my child for this condition that is so rare and potentially deadly, I don't want to speak to someone who is an amateur. So,
Right.
um,
Absolutely.
so,
Absolutely. You're talking about the life of your 4-year-old child. Yeah, you
right.
want the best in class.
Right. And
Yeah.
so, so you really have to be ready to advocate from the get-go, but that also will, put people up in arms, because there's a lot of ego in the hospital. And like you described too, there's also what I would almost describe as like an adrenaline based like euphoria when something is unique and rare.
Mhm.
They really they stop, like the humanity kind of stops being there, and they objectify your child, you know, that there's something to be gained from your child, instead of kind of seeing this as an opportunity for real caring. And as you know, I kind of got into, I think the first time that we chatted about you know, understanding that people are drawn to certain careers for certain reasons, and many of them may have a background that you know, intensive care like the ICU will draw people who maybe grew up in an intense environment, and they like opportunities for power, for control in intense environments. And so understanding that those things can be playing out with your child, you know, with your child's care, and with you if you're an adult entering the system.
Absolutely. And, you know, from that point, they really started with the aggressive interventions, right?
Yeah.
They started, you know, the swarm of medications, they're really strong diuretics. I think that was it Lasix and maybe Diarel.
Yes, Lasix and Diarrhea, which up to that point in the, you know, when we were at our local emergency room before we were transferred, I remember when they administered the Lasix that the nurse had told me that oftentimes his patients don't even make it to the bathroom to have to pee because it's so harsh. It really pushes fluids out of the body very, very quickly. And so I just remember with Autumn, you know, urinating, and then she would often have diarrhea at the same time. It's like the flush is very strong. And I just remember feeling red flags all over about doing this to someone's system who is so like deprived of you know, its needs in terms of, you know, nourishment and just energy. Yeah, it's so rapid, and it seems so harsh. And so, but they would go on to, you know, also administer diuretics that aren't approved for pediatric use, which at the time I did not know, but, you know, they were saying things like how Bumex is the equivalent of Lasix when we stopped wanting to use Lasix because we saw her kidney shut down, and that a side effect is actually kidney failure. So,
Yes. Yeah.
which she quickly moved into. And additionally, like though, you know, I really advocated to space medications apart because they are never studied in conjunction with one another. People don't realize that in terms of approval and safety. And so when I was advocating for that, you know, I had the doctors speaking about how I must not be taking Autumn's care seriously. And Autumn actually went on to throw up blood. And I later would find out that aminophylline, which they, you know, added to this cocktail that they were giving to her, uh, that without my advocacy to try to space these things out, we wouldn't have necessarily known that that's what caused Autumn to throw up blood. And you can even look up aminophylline, and it will describe exactly what I saw, which was that the blood that gets thrown up actually looks like coffee grounds. And so they kept trying to tell me, well, that's just the E. coli. Now, Autumn hadn't been throwing up other than that one time, almost 6 or 7 days prior at that point. And so for her to all of a sudden start throwing up and it's blood, I don't believe was E. coli. Like, and then, you know, looking up aminophylline and kind of getting this confirmation, especially because the threshold for aminophylline, I would also find out is it's a very small window between what's supposed to be helpful for treatment, if it's even warranted, and what's actually toxic. So. Right. Yeah. So without me advocating to space these things apart, even just by 15 minutes, you know, I was saying, I want to be able to know that we wouldn't necessarily have been able to remove that from her treatment. And then who knows what would have happened if Autumn had continued throwing up blood.
Yeah. And I think that at one point, and I'm trying to remember, it's been a while. But I remember at one point, and I think this is maybe where we got connected, was that they were talking about doing a blood transfusion.
Yeah.
And they denied a directed blood donation. And at that point, is that the point where you got connected with us? Because I remember they were giving her the albumin, which they did not inform you was a human blood product. And I think that's when I talked to you, and I will never forget that conversation. Hope.
Yeah.
And just, I mean, I just, it brings tears to my eyes to even just think about just how helpless you felt in that moment.
Yeah, real despair because,
Yeah.
it was, and so originally they weren't denying, they were really like pushing off the directed blood donation. And I didn't understand why. Like they kept saying like, oh, it would take a week to turn around. It takes a long time to be seen. Like, because as soon as we got there, when they said, this can sometimes result in needing a blood transfusion, immediately we said, okay, we want our blood. And they, would kind of push us off. And then, eventually Billy wound up calling when it started to look pretty dire. And he was able to get in within 30 minutes, and they had threatened us originally with a court order there to have Red Cross blood. Now when they brought me aside a million times to ask why I wouldn't just do a random donor's blood, I explained that, if you just look at your own paperwork that you want me to sign, I sign away all liability from the hospital. So, this has to do with like, I don't know the lifestyle of the people that are donating blood. It's not just even about things like HIV, which I'm signing off on, like the hospital will not be sued, right? Because they keep saying, well, the blood is clean. And I say, and what does that process look like? But additionally, I don't know what medications this person takes. I don't know if this person smokes or drinks. I don't know, their lifestyle in general. And why not? Why wouldn't you want my child to have blood from someone that we consider safe and healthy, right? Because we want her body to continue to improve. And you know nothing about the lifestyle of these people, in addition to signing off all liability to the hospital. And so, we had met other parents in the hospital who were like, oh yeah, they kind of made it seem like it would be really challenging and wasn't an option. And so we just did the Red Cross blood. And I think that's really sad because it is your right. And I know that some hospitals genuinely don't allow, direct donor blood. But given that this option was available, but they were still trying to make it so that we couldn't access it. They keep telling us that they've called and they've called. I'm like, well, who's calling? And they could never point me to who would call. And so, after the fact, they did, find someone that they were able to say, oh, well, this doctor called and then tried to say that the reason that we were able to get the blood, less than 24 hours later, not a week later, was actually because of my husband. But they're trying to say the one doctor that did eventually call, it was because of him. And actually, my husband is the one who called, the next day when they said, okay, we're going to move forward with a court order for the blood transfusion. And they said, oh, it can be there by 6 p.m. Yeah. So it was just really horrifying that they had been lying to us and using coercion to try to get us, I assume, what is like a contract with something like Red Cross.
Right. There must be a financial incentive somewhere. I don't know. I haven't gone that far down that rabbit hole, but my gut tells me that there is some type of profit driven or financial incentive. Otherwise they would not care, because the testing is exactly the same, whether it's directed donation or the testing process is the same. So for them to say it's not safe is absurd, because they all do the same process. So.
Right. And Autumn is a universal receiver. So it's like, why wouldn't you want her parents? And now at some point, then they started saying things like, well, if you ever have to donate an organ to her, then her body could be more likely to reject it. And I said, what about the crisis at hand?
Let's take one thing at a time here.
So it was just a really horrifying experience from the get-go. But it seemed that at every juncture of some sort of health intervention that they were working against us. And for what reason, we still don't entirely know, other than, as horrifying as it is to look back on, we often had the organ procurement specialist walking the halls,
Oh God, that's
So, you don't really understand, like as a parent, why these people would work against the best interests of your child other than profit.
Yeah. Yeah. It is a very profit driven system, as we all know, and we've come to learn. Everything that they do, there's a reason behind it. Now we've got a few minutes before we go to break, so I don't want to get too heavily into this next part, but I do want to mention that we're leading up to Autumn being placed on a ventilator. She was placed on a ventilator and she was kept very heavily sedated. despite the fact we had expert testimony and expert that came in through Remnant, and that she did meet the criteria for extubation, and we were heavily advocating for that. Do you believe? Why do you believe that they prolonged her intubation? Do you feel like they did that as a way to hold you hostage?
Yes, we also did find out that one of the fellows that was working, so there are kind of different tiers of people who are learning specialization in these, in these medical environments. One of the fellows who was kind of in charge of Autumn's medical care, when it came to her intubation, was during COVID, which is this kind of the tail end of the COVID chapter. But her husband had also been an emergency room doctor, and he was featured in the New York Times and quite some other large publications, I believe, advocating for ventilator use. So I do believe that there was some sort of potential like profit that they were receiving, maybe as like a couple. I'm not totally sure. But given how outspoken her husband had been to be featured in these very large publications, I feel like there was an alternative agenda at play with Autumn. And I do know that there are contracts that we had kind of been aware of about how long of ventilator use, when it's extended, how much more money the hospital receives, especially during COVID.
Yeah, during COVID, if they were kept on that ventilator for 90, I believe it was 96 hours or more, then that financial incentive grew exponentially. So that's definitely a thing. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise, that there were financial incentives, particularly during COVID. And I'm certain that those exist today.
Yeah. And the other thing that I really want to drive home for listeners is that, again, at a teaching hospital, there's also an element at play of them very much wanting to learn on your child. And when I would ask the nurses and residents and some of the fellows, like what drew you to working at a children's hospital? Because my husband was always surprised when they didn't have kids themselves. Like the vast majority of them did not have children themselves, which you see in other careers too, like teaching, where it's like it's hard, it takes a toll on you. But often the response was actually that it was more about compliance. That's not their wording. That they would say, "Oh, adults are so grumpy; they just always tell you no." And so with kids, they're able to override that because children typically have like a fawning response, where they want to be a good child. They want to be a good listener. And so when you're dealing with both of those elements, like it's very challenging, because when we got out of the hospital, when we finally made it out of the hospital, I learned from a nephrologist that we were connected with that supports medical freedom, that it was very likely that Autumn was put on traditional dialysis as a teaching opportunity for the surgery that kept being performed and reperformed on her neck. When the more kind of supportive and less invasive option, which was never presented to us, even though I asked multiple times if there were alternative options available, was peritoneal dialysis, which actually we would never have been had the wool pulled over our eyes about the albumin, the blood product that we weren't able to consent to, that they can give her without our permission, because it's just saline with peritoneal dialysis. And so that was a less invasive option, but that does not give students the opportunity to practice on a much more vulnerable area, which is the neck and the arteries in the neck for dialysis. Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely. I mean, yeah, they probably would have been bored with the peritoneal dialysis, which I've done many times in the ICU.
Yeah.
But yeah, that wouldn't have been exciting for them, which is just sad. But because at the end of the day, it comes down to the patient in the bed. It should always be the least invasive approach, and what is best for, again, the patient in the bed. It's not about us. We're up against a break, but we will come back and we'll dig in further to this story. America Out Loud Talk Radio plays on the iHeartRadio network. You can also listen on our media player from any web browser anywhere in the world. We have the best in-class apps available on Apple, Android, or Alexa, 24/7 Great Talk Radio. All of our shows go to podcast the following day. You can hear them on apps such as Spotify, Stitcher, Pandora, iHeart Podcasts, and many more. Be sure to subscribe and rate the show on Apple Podcasts for me. Don't forget to check out our online store at americaoutloud.shop, where you can find all of the products that we represent on our network at a discounted rate, including an incredible line of products from Chemical Free Body. Unlike the majority of supplements you'll find on the market today, with Chemical Free Body, you won't have to worry about harmful ingredients, binders, fillers, or flow agents. Their ultra-safe breakthrough nanosilver technology destroys pathogens, balances the microbiome, and boosts immunity. All of these products are proudly made in the USA and are backed by an unheard of double your money back guarantee. I've made a twice daily Green 85 drink part of my routine, which has led to a decrease in belly bloat and an increase in my energy throughout the day. Use promo code OUTLOUD to save 20% off the Healthy Gut Bundle. I'll catch you on the other side of this break. Stay with us.
During COVID, we got educated on the power of natural virus protection and immune boosting using vitamins A, C, D, zinc, and quercetin. The problem? Getting them at the right dosage from truly natural sources that doesn't cost an arm and a leg. Enter the Daily V-Stack. Using breakthrough cellular absorption technology, we put those vitamins together and supercharge them with a complete multi-mineral complex. The Daily V-Stack is basically an oral IV of 6 products, all in one at an affordable price. Go to chemicalfreebody.com/outloud today. Get the Daily V-Stack, protect yourself, boost your immune system, and save 20% on your first order.
You wouldn't go a day without brushing your teeth or washing your hands. What about washing your nose? I mean, your nose does filter the air you breathe, air loaded with bacteria, viruses, and irritants. Make nasal hygiene part of your routine with Clear. No messy bottles to fill, no drowning sensation. Clear is a natural drug-free saline with the added benefit of xylitol, which blocks bacterial and viral adhesion. Available in stores and online at clear.com. That is XLEAR.com.
Feeling run down, foggy, or constantly drained? Your body might be lacking the support it needs at the cellular level. Recharge from the Wellness Company is a doctor-formulated supplement designed to restore your energy, focus, and immune function. It features the first ever combination of methylene blue and urolithin A, clinically studied ingredients that support mitochondrial health, boost cellular repair, and enhance cognitive performance. With added NAD3, CoQ10, and PQQ, Recharge is the daily solution for deep lasting energy, not just a temporary boost. Visit twc.health/outloud and use code OUTLOUD for 20% off your first order. Power up your body and mind with Recharge.
Well, did you see Google quietly updated its AI principles, removing its pledge not to use AI for weapons or surveillance, a promise they agreed to in 2018? Well, the American people have seen Google's track record, prompting the question, is Google an untrustworthy player in the AI race? Now is our time, my fellow Americans. AmericaOutloud.news. Liberty and justice for all.
It's time and this is why.
Welcome back to Nurses Out Loud on America Out Loud Talk Radio. I'm your host, Nurse Kimberly Overton. Wherever you're listening from today and whatever you're doing, I thank you for giving me the gift of your time. Be sure to make AmericaOutloud.news your daily stop for all the latest news and happenings. We all must do our part and share the stories, the articles, the podcasts, and videos so we can help secure America's future. If you're just joining us, I've been talking with the mother of 4-year-old Autumn Schall, Hope Schachter. Let's jump right back in. Hope, thank you again for being here with me today and for sharing, your story, which has really touched so many people. I think many people feel like we've kind of walked right alongside of you during this journey. So thank you for taking the time to give us this update on Autumn.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just so grateful for, the work that you've done and for everyone who advocated for Autumn. Otherwise, I really don't think we would have seen her 6th birthday this year with her, laughing and enjoying her time with her family.
Yeah. And it was such an honor to be able to walk this really, it's a journey, and we're still walking with you. We will always walk beside you. I can promise you that. Autumn is so special to us. I can't tell you what, your family means to our team, and we'll get into that a little bit more. I want to talk a little bit about when CPS got involved, and when Remnant stepped in, and how all of that played out.
Yeah.
Touch on that.
Sure. Yeah. So, after many of what they called things like charting errors, where they pushed far too many fluids on Autumn, she wound up gaining 6 to 9 pounds in fluids. But she had started to be able to urinate again after, her kidneys had entered kidney failure. They did start to come back online. And immediately they wanted to push Lasix again, which I was like absolutely astonished by.
Yeah.
And so
how you got there in the first place, right?
Right. And so we had declined that, and opted for some less harsh diuretics eventually, because I really wanted her kidneys to have time to sort of kind of figure out how to function again before forcing them. Because also with these diuretics like Lasix, it creates an electrolyte exchange, which basically tells the kidneys like you're doing it wrong. Like it wants them to do something different. And in that process of flushing, you lose so many minerals. And anyway, it's not worth getting into exactly how they work, but it's very harsh. And so we wanted to go slow. But then once she started to get more urine output, they came in, and looking back now, I know this was probably part of the whole approach of having her as a case study. And they said, today we're going to challenge Autumn's kidneys. And they wanted to do 1.5 liters of fluids for her, which is a lot of fluid for such a little girl whose kidneys aren't even fully functioning yet. And so, we kind of hesitated because she'd already put on all these fluids because of their, medical mismanagement. And we didn't really feel like we had the option to say no if we wanted to get her out. And we moved forward because we wanted to get her home as soon as possible. And later that night, Autumn actually wound up having a seizure, even though I kept checking in with the doctors that I didn't feel like she was doing well, that her head hurt, that she was throwing up water, but she was telling me constantly that she was thirsty. And so Autumn went on to have a seizure, and she was brought back to the ICU, where they told me originally that they wanted to put her under for an MRI to rule out a stroke. And I remember actually having Gail on the phone, and Gail saying, I wouldn't do that. I would maybe wait. And I wish that I didn't feel that it was safe to say no at this point with her seizure, that I felt like they would call CPS for that alone. But actually Autumn did start to, which the neurologist actually didn't seem concerned. It was the fellow, ICU fellow that was, kind of going on and on about the potential for a stroke. And Autumn actually did open her eyes right before they put her under, and asked Daddy if it was daytime and she could have coffee with him. And it was literally the moment that they were putting her under. So I don't feel like we got an accurate read of her state, but they put her under for what we were told was an MRI. And then we kept asking about extubating her, and they were being very evasive. And before they left one evening, I spoke with them, and I said, where is this going? Because I'm not seeing what you're seeing about kind of these criteria to get her extubated. And they told me that, it would be like an unfolding process that we would, be in communication about. And so I said, well, I want to be notified of every medication that you're going to administer to her. So I want to be woken up for every single one. So I was woken up for fentanyl. I was woken up for Tylenol, which I declined because she just had fentanyl. I was woken up for Ativan. She couldn't be properly sedated, which, when you get into all of the details of our story, which is very long, that's a big part of it too, a big part of the trauma. Because she eventually winds up on wrist restraints and being given antipsychotics. I woke up at one point, because I also have a newborn in the hospital room with me.
Important
And so
part of the story.
right. And so
Yeah.
I was nursing, and I noticed that, her heart rate was really high. And I said, why is her heart rate so high? He had, the nurse at the time, discussed, I do believe they woke me for a blood pressure medication that she was required to have as well. And I said, well, what has changed? And he said, well, nothing has changed other than that we gave her the Lasix an hour ago. And at that point, we had refused Lasix at every turn because her, kidneys had just started to function again.
Yeah.
And so I had said, like, we've been declining that medication. You can tell by our notes that we have used an alternative diuretic. And so, you administered a medication without my consent. That is illegal. And so I, wanted to kind of pursue a complaint, and I expressed that. They sent the social worker to talk to me, and I expressed that. And within 24 hours, we had CPS knocking on our door, because I feel very strongly that, at this point, they had made so many mistakes. Intentional or not, I don't know that they were mistakes so much as an experiment, but that they wanted to deem us as unfit so that, their liability and credibility was not at stake. And so if they could do that, if they could make us look like the problem, then they could continue, treating Autumn in terms of profit, and then also in terms of, experimentation. So yeah, that's when, CPS became involved, and it resulted in, a hearing, which, they were continuing to, the doctors were continuing to lie to CPS to say that we weren't in compliance, even though, multiple times throughout that night, I had them, check in. I'm asking the resident to please come speak to me. I'm asking the attending, who would not come to speak to me, until the hearing, at which point, they couldn't take Autumn away because we had been in compliance, but they also had made up lies. They had made up outright lies. And I actually created a 10-page rebuttal when we did get the documentation, which we didn't, receive until after the hearing, which is also illegal. The right to due process. I saw all their lies, and I was able to have this very extensive rebuttal from what the doctors were saying versus what actually happened, which would be reflected in her chart, although they could technically lie. Like there were, we worked with a couple different organizations to try to get Autumn's story out. And one of them, had noticed that the doctor that I said called her a case study was not the doctor that was on her medical notes as being there when she was admitted. And I said, well, can you show me? And he said that, it was at 2 a.m. and I'm saying that we didn't arrive until 6 a.m., which we didn't. But I guess they had, often notes are written after the fact. Yes. And so, so whoever was kind of in charge of her intake process, I believe, when the local emergency room was calling Lucile Packard is when they probably started her notes. And so they were saying it was that doctor and not the doctor who took over at shift change that next morning who called her a case study. So it's, it's a process where they can also try to cover themselves via like their medical charting, Yeah.
And I want to talk a little bit about Remnant's role in your story, and what led you to reach out to us at Remnant, and just if you want to talk about how our team stepped in to support you during this really just chaotic time.
I mean, it's kind of a long journey that we got to, because it started with, Blessed by His Blood, helping us find, donors that we were comfortable with, especially because a lot of these organizations for direct donor blood, allow you to even talk to, who could be donating to your child. Not that you're necessarily interviewing them, but, you just want to get a comfort level for whose blood your child would receive or yourself. And so as things started to get more and more hostile with the hospital, I just wanted to feel like I had someone on my team that could kind of provide another set of eyes to how this has all transpired, even just from learning that a side effect of these medications that tipped Autumn over the edge into kidney failure, which we're being told all of these symptoms are just the HUS. They're telling us from the get-go, like, oh, it's up and down, it's back and forth, it's a roller coaster ride to have HUS. And so everything was attributed to like some sort of absurdity of HUS, that it's just an unpredictable like disease. And so, or condition. And so it was hard for me to have the ability to advocate that these things were attributable to their interventions and their mistakes, and not just HUS itself. And so that's what I originally needed some help with. And then obviously, just the hurdles of having, Autumn get the blood that we wanted for her, and to have people on our team when they're threatening court orders, to be able to speak to that. So yeah. And then eventually we really wanted to get Autumn out because I felt like she would heal at home. And the more I have learned about like the kidneys and stress hormones and renin and, being a therapist myself, it's called psychoneuroimmunology, is the connection of all of these things. And would she heal in this environment where she feels terror constantly? Of course not. Right. And so, we were eventually connected with a home healthcare doctor, thankfully, through all of your advocacy, who actually offers so many things at home, including, ventilators. So there are options out there. It's just finding the connections to them. And that's what I was so desperate for, was to get Autumn out of a state of terror, because I think that the concepts behind psychoneuroimmunology are why she wound up with HUS to begin with, and her toddler brother didn't, right? With everything we'd been through in terms of destabilization of our family and the fires, and not having a proper support system, and the toll that had taken on us, and then to wind up with a very sensitive system, and how this all ties in with adrenaline, and how her system had been so taxed, and it made her vulnerable. So that's really, really important, is that you can't heal when you're terrified. Like,
that's true. And there's nothing conducive to healing about a hospital. There just isn't.
Right. You're being woken up, constantly in the middle of the night. She also would experience terror from the blood pressure monitor, which, the primary medical advocate that we started with, Gail, had talked about how often hospitals will set it too tight too. And so she would stiffen and scream when she would hear the start of the blood pressure cuff. And so, right. And is she going to, and just the fact, I told you that she would not be properly sedated when they were even performing the surgeries on her neck. She would wake up for the dialysis port placement. And so just the amount of terror this, child kind of went through, I did not see her getting better. I did not, and not just visibly, I did not, as her mother, see her get better. I couldn't see getting better in that situation.
Right. And I do want to I'm so grateful to Gail. So when we speak of Gail, we're talking about Nurse Gail McCrae.
Yeah.
Who's absolutely amazing. We are so blessed to have her on our team at Remnant Healthcare, but she is a force. Gail is a force. And
I want to say that it was funny because connecting with these organizations to try to share Autumn's story. And we were doing that, in hopes of being able to bring some sort of justice for Autumn, in terms of the legal system. But I actually met like journalists who would be like, I didn't know Gail McCrae was a part of your story. Now, I didn't know who Gail McCrae was, other than that she was this wonderful angel that had been on the phone with me. So.
Yeah, Gail is very well known in the medical freedom circle.
Yes, I didn't know.
Very well respected. And what a blessing. I am honored to call her a friend and to call her a part of our team at Remnant Healthcare. I mean, she's just absolutely amazing. But I'm curious, like what part or what particular actions we had a lot of different kind of moving parts through all of this. We were doing media exposure, advocacy, demonstration, all of the things that we were pulling together. What part do you believe made the difference, or do you feel like it was just a combination of all of it?
I feel like it was such a combination. I mean, I do think that one of the big parts, which I remember you texting me, like, I think we should take this public, because having the hospital aware that there were other eyes on Autumn was really important.
And we shut down, I'd like to say we shut down, what, 2 or 3 phone lines of Lucile Packard. And I am like, I just am so proud of that fact to all of our followers. And we had such a great response from the community, from the medical freedom community. We had, Josh Yoder was helping, and Vandersteel was helping, Stella Emanuel. Just so many people stood up, and really got on board to help Autumn. But we're just down to the last few minutes. So I really want to hear, how is Autumn doing today? How has she healed and come along this journey?
Well, I remember at the time thinking that I was worried that the light wouldn't come back into Autumn's eyes, after all these sedatives like ketamine and whatnot, and then having to give her antipsychotics to, kind of counteract that. And then, I remember when we pulled into our driveway and Autumn lit up, wait, we're going home. It was like nothing really felt real, to be back in the real world. And so Autumn, when we brought her home, she was unable to walk and she still had a feeding tube. And those, we kind of quickly overcame those challenges with support. Dr. Fox, who was the at-home provider, he, met us at the house that day, and we did have to continue working through also connections that, your advocacy helped us establish. We were able to, work with a medical freedom nephrologist, but we did have to continue doing blood draws for Autumn in case CPS ever became involved, to monitor her kidneys. She, still has remained slightly out of range for her age. Now, she was always like a little camel, which I used to describe. She doesn't love to drink fluids anyway. She's like her dad, so I have to always kind of push those. And so in terms of there's aspects of thriving, and then there's aspects of just continued trauma. When we were getting ready to leave and they had the people with the hazmat suits on, it was like a physical therapist and an occupational therapist, I think. And, they still have the hazmat suits on because she once had E. coli. So, and they're telling me, she's such a little girl, good little girl. Whenever, we ask if we can do something, she always says yes. And I said, well, that's because she's learned that either you will restrain her and do it anyway, or you will drug her and do it anyway. That's not being a good girl, that she's just being compliant because she doesn't feel like she has any other choices. And so that, if anyone is aware of the book, The Body Keeps the Score, that continues on. Months later, Autumn was in the kitchen with me, and, she's having a normal preschooler meltdown about the color cup she has or something, which as a therapist, I know to make room for, and that there's big feelings. But at the same time, it eventually turned into her screaming, "Mama, get me out of here." And it's just me and her in the kitchen. Yeah. And I know that's about so much more. And kind of what I shared with you in terms of psychoneuroimmunology is, the continued production in Autumn of a lot of adrenaline and her kidneys and renin and kind of this system of being in fight or flight. And so, we are looking at, which, these things are also costly. We're looking at, stem cell treatments for support for Autumn. We all have complex PTSD that we're working through. In terms of mineral imbalances, I've been looking to get hair tissue mineral analysis that she's had one other time to kind of see, where she's at now, and just trying to really make space for all the ways that her system has been impacted and will potentially continue to be impacted, because she is more at risk down the road, given that she's had dialysis, for, her kidneys to be overwhelmed is maybe an easy way to put it. And so her nephrologist had even said to us, even though she's in good shape now, Autumn should probably not do martial arts, having a kick to the kidneys, she is more at risk. And so for a little girl, there's always I always have I can't keep her in a bubble. She loves gymnastics and whatnot, but like I always have my guard up. Like I am always hyper vigilant for Autumn and the ways that these things are continuing to, put pressure on her little system and that it's hard to move out of. And the idea of consent for Autumn will continue to play out for the rest of her life. I'm a therapist, so I know that, and I'm not going to try and deny that because it makes other people more comfortable. I know everyone wants a really big redemption story, but Autumn will be working through this and metabolizing this throughout her life,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and this is why I feel like it is so important. And I tell families all the time, the importance of having an advocacy plan in place. Like, please don't wait until the crisis occurs. It is so important to have that plan in place. I tell people
because again, Autumn had never needed Tylenol even,
just never know. Everybody's good until they're not.
Right, exactly. Like I'm this holistic nutritionist as well. And, I feel like we eat and Autumn is not a picky eater. So one of her favorite things is avocado and beet salad. Like, and she eats lots of pork chops. Like she's like an amazing eater. And yet still, like when our bodies are under stress, especially the prolonged stress that our family had been under, there are vulnerabilities you may not be aware of. And so you won't know until you're in it, that you have to go outside of kind of the scope of your maybe comfort to get help. Like everyone is vulnerable to actually genuinely needing the hospital at some point, even if it's a broken bone,
Yeah, exactly. And when you need to get into that system, the importance of an advocate cannot be understated. And I say it all the time, whether it be, our organization or another, please just have a plan in place. But I do encourage everyone to get on board with Remnant Healthcare. It's remnanthealthcare.org. Get that advocacy plan in place. Membership is just $30 a month. So it's and I think Hope can attest to the help and the importance of having that in place when you do meet the crisis. And that is all the time that we have for today, friends. But remember, we are here on the air 5 days a week, Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern with a different nurse host daily. You can also catch the encore at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please be sure to tune in and listen to myself and these courageous nurses. As we walk you through all of these hot topics, we will empower you with information and education. We will advocate and we will stand in the gap for you because we are nurses and this is what we do. I'm your host, Nurse Kimberly Overton, and you can find me here every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern. Until next time, be safe, be well, and God bless. Remember, we are in a war for truth. We are putting out a bounty on the real misinformation and exposing the purveyors of propaganda. No topic is off limits as we shine our lights and expose the darkness.
It's time